Hi, I'm Audra. My son once actually laughed, when I told him I was building something. He called it a useless pet gadget. Said it out loud at the dinner table, right between compliments on the salad. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was realizing it wasn't just a joke. It was a plan. One that stripped my name off my own work, buried my pitch decks, and turned my silence into a weapon against me. Why did the people closest to me think I was disposable? And what would they do when I refused to vanish? I arrived at Travis's home with a bottle of wine I knew they wouldn't open. The house gleamed, glass everywhere, spotless floors, the scent of new paint still lingering. It didn't smell like family. The invitation hadn't been mine, of course. Seraphine had sent a short text that morning. Dinner at 6, just something casual. Casual in that house meant curated playlists and plated greens. I walked into the dining room and found my name card. Misspelled. Audria, scribbled in black pen on a place card that didn't match the others. Mine was placed at the far end of the table, right by the pantry door. I stood there for a second longer than I meant to, my eyes tracing the curve of the ink, before Juniper ran over and wrapped her arms around me. "Grandma! Did you bring the new thingy? The dog one?" she whispered, wide-eyed. Seraphine approached then, tight smile, perfect blouse. "Glad you could make it. Traffic okay?" she asked, already turning away. Travis didn't bother with hello. He was deep in conversation with Seraphine about a wine rack delivery gone wrong, something about temperature zones. I found my seat in silence. The dinner was as stiff as the linen napkins. Someone complimented the pesto. Another asked about Juniper's school. Then, in a lull, I made the mistake of speaking. "I've been testing a new version of the AI collar," I said, reaching for the bread. "It's picking up better behavioral signals now. Might even predict seizures based on—" "Oh, that little collar thing?" Travis interrupted, mid-chew. "You're still tinkering with wires like it's the 80s? A few chuckles rolled across the table, soft and awkward. Seraphine tilted her head and chimed in. "She's just being creative in retirement, right?" I took a sip of water, slow, letting it cool the heat rising in my throat. They went back to their conversation. No one asked what I meant by behavioral signals. No one asked anything. Juniper glanced at me from across the table, her smile faltering. I pivoted. "Juniper, how's your math class? You were learning fractions last time we talked." She lit up and talked about her project, a pizza-themed breakdown of parts and wholes. I nodded, tried to focus, but behind my eyes, all I could see were the solder burns on my fingers, the nights I stayed up rewriting code, the garage that smelled of coffee and burned plastic. There was a moment, not long, but long enough. When I thought about that night, I held Mark's old watch in one hand and a microchip in the other, wondering if he'd think I'd lost my mind, or if he'd be proud. "Grandma," Juniper whispered, tugging at my sleeve under the table. "Can I try the collar on Peanut tomorrow?" I smiled, for real this time. "I think that can be arranged." Seraphine caught the whisper and laughed, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Please don't let her put that dog in a lab coat." More laughter. I raised my glass again, not to toast, just to cover the tightness in my jaw. Dinner wound down. Travis stood to thank everyone for coming, complimented Seraphine on the table setting and the centerpiece. Handmade, apparently. He didn't mention me, not once. My hand brushed against my purse, where my pitch deck was neatly printed and sealed in a folder. I'd thought, maybe, just maybe, I could ask for a connection, a name, a foot in the door. But I didn't reach for it. I smiled at Juniper instead. "I'll show you something cool next time." She grinned. "Promise?" I nodded. She had no idea that something cool would save a life in less than a week. The morning light filtered through the blinds, throwing slanted stripes across my desk like bars I hadn't noticed until now. My coffee sat untouched. The bitterness in my mouth wasn't from the brew. It had been 3 days since that dinner, 3 long days of going over every smirk, every word, every silence. I couldn't let it settle like this. I opened the bottom drawer of my file cabinet, the one I rarely touched. It held old receipts, expired warranties, a tangle of USB drives, and in the back, a thin folder labeled VC Contacts, Declined. I flipped through it with no particular aim until one page caught my eye. A printed email. It was polite, formal. Thank you for submitting your materials. At this time, we are not moving forward. I frowned. That didn't sound familiar. I was almost certain I never received this. Then I saw the footer. Referred by T. Rayner, decline. I froze. My breath caught in my chest like it had collided with something solid. I sat down. Slowly. I went back to my inbox, scouring for that thread. Nothing, not even in spam. Then I pulled 3 more printed rejections. Every single one had a variation of that same footer, all from firms I'd carefully curated, all now linked to Travis. I started pulling up old emails on my laptop. I compared timelines. I traced forwarded attachments. The story unraveled itself faster than I could blink. While I was burning midnight oil in my garage, he was quietly rerouting my efforts to the trash. He hadn't just mocked me, he'd buried me. I opened another drawer, this one labeled Legal Family Advisory. At the top sat a red folder. Consulting Agreement, Travis. I remembered when he gave it to me. Just something to formalize my help, Mom. Keeps the accountants happy, he'd said, pouring me a glass of Pinot Noir, tapping his glass against mine like he was doing me a favor. I'd been flattered, relieved even. I'd thought it meant he believed in me again, that he wanted to be part of something good. I opened the folder. The contract inside was thick, legal speak in 10-point font. My signature stared back at me on the last page. I turned to the clauses, one by one, until I found it. Clause 8.3. All intellectual property developed, advised upon, or branded under T. Rayner, directly or indirectly, shall be considered shared property under advisory terms. The words blurred. My head spun. That clause wasn't just sneaky, it was theft wrapped in family language. How could I have missed this? I set the contract down and stood up, pacing. My hand brushed the edge of my workbench. A soldering iron rolled and clinked onto the floor. I didn't pick it up. A memory hit me like a dropped plate. Travis, standing in this very room, wine in one hand, pen in the other. He had distracted me with stories about reorganizing finances, protecting assets, making things look clean for potential investors. I'd nodded, grateful. I'd been trying to protect him from the shame of his last failed merger, and all the while, he was slipping a leash around my neck. That was the cruelty, not just the deception, but the calm, polished way he delivered it. Like he was helping, like he was shielding me. I sat back down. The contract remained open. I read it again, not as a mother this time, but as the founder of something real. I didn't see my son's name. I saw an opportunist. I lit a small candle on my desk, the one I usually saved for moments of clarity. Then I created a new folder on my desktop, Contingency for Me Only. I opened a blank document and began typing. A timeline, a clause, a list of names. He wanted clean paperwork? He'd get clean paperwork, but not the kind he was expecting. Rain tapped steadily on the garage roof, a rhythm both comforting and accusatory. I'd been sitting on the work stool for over an hour, the same half-wiped mug of coffee by my elbow, untouched. Scout lay curled under the bench, snoring softly. His warmth was the only sound of life in a space that had once buzzed with optimism. I reached for the corner drawer and opened it slowly, more out of instinct than purpose. There, tucked beneath a roll of masking tape, sat the old jewelry box. Not the kind meant for sparkle or show, just something I'd kept since the day Mark slipped that ring on my finger. I lifted the lid. The ring wasn't there, of course. The indentation where it used to rest looked like a pressed memory. I had sold it last year. Quietly, no ceremony, no tears. Just a visit to a pawn shop on South Lamar and a polite thank you to the man behind the glass counter. That ring paid the deposit on a software license. The kind of decision no one sees, but that decides everything. I leaned back and let my eyes wander over the mess I once called a workspace. Wires, sketches, a soldering iron with a melted grip. My sleeping cot still leaned against the wall. Thin, unforgiving. There were nights I'd laid on it with ice packs on both wrists, calculating how many meals I could skip to keep the next payment on track. Above the bench, still taped to the wall, was the faded wedding photo. Mark smiling like he always did when he thought I was saying something too smart to follow. I hadn't taken it down, but I hadn't looked at it either. Not really. By mid-morning, the rain had eased, and I decided to show my face at the local startup showcase. I wasn't on the speaker list. I wasn't even on the RSVP. But I'd been emailed a ticket weeks ago, probably by someone's intern. I went anyway. The venue was a repurposed community center, now with fiber internet and standing desks. The check-in table was polite but flustered. My badge was handwritten. Again. Audrey Craft. I didn't bother correcting them. The room was arranged in tight rows, and sure enough, my seat was near the restroom. Table 12. I sat down, tucked my bag beneath my chair, and listened. A group of young founders buzzed around the next table, pitching to a circle of eager suits. At one point, I heard my name, not from them, but from behind. "She thinks she's starting something big," Seraphine said, barely lowering her voice. "It's kind of sweet, honestly." Laughter. That kind people save for when they don't think you'll do anything about it. I didn't turn around. Instead, I folded my hands in my lap and looked ahead. The keynote began. A young woman, maybe late 20s, talked about equity, disruption, and culture-forward scaling. Her slides were sharp, her tone polished. And still, all I could think was, you've never missed a mortgage payment to pay an engineer. You've never had to pick between heat and hardware. You've never sat across from your own son while he looked through you like you were a hobby he'd outgrown. I closed my eyes and drew a breath. Then I drew a line. Not a physical one, but the kind that says, quietly and without apology, that the world doesn't get to shrink me anymore. When the session ended, people shuffled to coffee stations, exchanged cards. I stayed seated. Then, with my Sharpie, I wrote 3 lines on the corner of the event whiteboard. They don't see me, but I see everything, and I'm still building. No name, no flourish. Before I left, I turned and took a photo of the room, of the whiteboard, the stage, the chairs still warm. A record for myself. Because next time, I wouldn't be seated in the shadows. The invitation came 2 days after the whiteboard. A short email from the event coordinator at the Austin Community Expo, asking if I could present my prototype in a short slot they'd had a last-minute cancellation for. I don't know who put my name in, but I said yes before I let myself think too long. Ilara helped me polish a 3-minute demo. Video, voiceover, all clean. It wasn't perfect, but it told the story. A collar that read more than barks and tail wags. It read signals. Anxiety, seizure precursors, the little signs that animals give off when something's not right. I hadn't gone public before, not truly. This was the first time I'd let more than 2 people see what I'd been building behind my garage door. Travis found out the same day the program went out. His company's newsletter forwarded it automatically to subscribers. The auditorium wasn't large, but the seats were filled. Local investors, tech bloggers, kids from the STEM program down the road. Ilara sat in the front row. I stood behind the curtain, adjusting the mic pinned to my blazer. Up next, the MC announced, a project bridging compassion and machine learning from Audra Craft. I walked out to polite applause. Not loud, not dismissive, just the kind you give someone you don't recognize. My slides came up. The first few frames rolled smoothly. The collar's image rotated in 3D. A dog's heartbeat graph pulsed softly on the screen. Then it glitched. The lights flickered, the screen blinked once. Then suddenly it wasn't the prototype on display anymore. It was a slideshow of family photos. Me stirring soup. Me trimming a Christmas tree. Me, sitting in Travis's living room, Juniper curled beside me. There were murmurs. Some people laughed. A few shifted uncomfortably. I didn't move. I looked to the bottom corner of the screen. The watermark said it all. Courtesy of T. Rayner Media Tools. No one else seemed to notice. Not the watermark anyway. But I did. Behind me, I could hear Alara whispering to the technician, "That's not our deck. That's not the right file." My hands stayed by my side. I didn't freeze. I settled. That moment where panic wants to rise, but age teaches you that silence, when chosen, can be sharper than shouting. The audio cut. The screen locked. The MC fumbled. "Seems we've had a technical issue." I stepped forward. "No slides needed," I said into the mic. "The tech might have failed. I didn't." The room quieted. I told them about Mia, my cat, how she'd stopped sleeping in her usual spot, how I missed the signs, how that guilt became a question. What if we could catch it sooner? I told them about the nights I worked with blistered fingers and a bad back. I told them about the collar and how it wasn't a gadget. It was a second chance. I didn't pitch, I spoke. And when I finished, I got something I hadn't expected. Not applause, not just that. I got stillness, the kind that means people heard you in their bones. Later, when I stepped outside, the sky had gone orange with late sun. My phone buzzed. A message from Travis. "Let's not make this personal. I can help shape your launch properly." I read it twice, once as a mother, then as a founder. Then I typed back, "You just made it personal." I hit delete on the thread, then opened a new folder on my desktop. Legal, Phase 1. 2 days after the presentation debacle, I found a new email waiting in my inbox. It was from Travis. Short, almost polite. "Let's meet. Coffee? Want to help you relaunch the right way." I stared at it, reread it twice. There was no apology, just that familiar, smug confidence wrapped in polite grammar. I should have ignored it. But something in me needed to see him. Not to hear his excuses, I already knew them, but to finish what he started. We met at a cafe that tried a little too hard to look industrial. Exposed brick, Edison bulbs, coffee served in glass jars. I arrived 10 minutes early. Not because I was eager, because I didn't want him to see me walk in. I printed out one copy of my revocation paperwork, sealed it in a folder. My slides? Digitally watermarked and encrypted. Travis strolled in 17 minutes late. No apology. He smiled like we were old friends catching up after years apart. "You look good," he said, sitting down like nothing had happened. "Resilient." I didn't return the compliment. He ordered a flat white, turned to me and said, "I think we both know that demo was a little rough, but there's still potential. I can help get things back on track. Bring in the right people." I let him keep talking. He laid out a plan, investment, rebranding, media coverage. "But," he added with a grin, "I'll need to be listed as co-founder. Optics, you know? I've got the connections, and your tech needs a face people already trust." My stomach turned. Not from shock. That part had died months ago. Just the sheer audacity of it. He sipped his coffee. "Think of it this way. You've built something meaningful. Let me make it visible. It's a win-win." I reached into my tote, pulled out the folder, and slid it across the table. "Already done," I said. He blinked. "What's this?" "Updated filings. Your previous rights have been revoked. You no longer hold any advisory or IP connection to my work." Travis stared at me, eyes narrowing. "You're serious?" "You won't shape anything anymore," I said, not raising my voice. "Just stating fact." He scoffed. "Mom, be realistic. You think this is how you win?" "Realistic," I repeated. "Let's talk about realistic. You hijacked my demo. You filed behind my back. You made me look like a joke in front of people who finally gave me a chance. And I'm still standing." He leaned back, arms crossed, silence stretching between us. The air in the cafe buzzed with low voices, espresso steam, the clink of ceramic. I thought about that day I signed the consulting agreement, how something in my gut twisted, but I ignored it. I'd told myself he meant well, that he just didn't know how to express it. I know better now. I did this without you, I said, and I'll finish it without you. He said nothing, just stared. I stood, tucked the receipt for my untouched coffee into my coat pocket, and walked out. That evening, I returned home to find the house quiet. Ilara had sent me a link earlier, but I hadn't opened it yet. Now I did. A thread was gaining traction, a clip, heavily edited, of me stumbling at the tech event, paired with some comment about senior tech hobbyists. The watermark was scrubbed. The captions made me look confused. Below it, people were laughing, commenting, retweeting. I sat down, not in anger, but in resolve. He wouldn't stop until I broke. And I wasn't going to break. The first subject line that caught my eye was from a name I didn't recognize. Then another, and another, all with variations of the same theme. Pet AI creator accused of IP theft? I clicked one, then another. There it was. A short video clip, shaky, poorly edited, but dressed in enough slick text overlays and buzzwords to feel legitimate. The footage was old. I recognized the meeting space, the outdated prototype, even the jacket I wore that day. The video voiceover said things like undisclosed source code and questionable ethics. They even dragged in quotes I'd given to a local blog and spliced them out of context. I didn't need to ask where it came from. The watermark was gone, but the fingerprints were unmistakable. Travis! My phone rang before I could finish watching. Ilara! Her voice was clipped and breathless. They pulled us, she said, from the accelerator program. Temporarily, they said, pending clarification. I didn't respond right away. I was staring at the video again, catching a frame where the camera angle conveniently cut off the part of the board where Ilara had signed her initials. The edits were crude, but in this space, perception often beats truth. They'll reverse it, I said finally, but we're going to have to speak first. I opened the shared folders I'd long ago archived. My mistake was not revoking Travis's access the moment I filed the new paperwork. I'd trusted that silence would keep things civil. I should have known better. This wasn't the first time Travis rewrote history to suit his story. He used to tell people he'd built his first company from scratch, neglecting to mention the loan from his grandfather, or the software engineer he refused to credit because she wasn't founder material. He had a gift for taking truth and folding it until it looked like something else. But this time, he'd used our family name to burn me publicly. Later that day, I got a text from Juniper. Grandma, I made a TikTok with Peanut and the collar. People love it. Can I tag your thingy? I smiled at her wording. That thingy had tracked the early signs of her dog's arrhythmia a month ago. We caught it in time, saved him. Of course, I replied. Tag it with the product name. I'll send the link. 2 hours later, the video had over 70,000 views. Then it was gone. She called me, confused. Dad said I had to take it down. He said it's not good for family privacy. I didn't mean to do something wrong. You didn't, I told her. You did exactly what was right. She was quiet, then asked, Is Dad mad at you? I think he's mad I didn't stay quiet. That evening, I poured a cup of tea and opened my website dashboard. I didn't call a lawyer, not yet. I didn't make threats. I wrote, not a defense, a statement. I titled it, Origin. I outlined the story of Mia, the hardware failures, the medical testing, the ethics guidelines I'd spent weeks writing with a vet tech from Ohio. I posted photos, dates, times, schematics. I didn't mention Travis. I didn't need to. The comments came slowly at first, then quickly. Other women founders, pet owners, strangers who said they'd been watching and wondered when I'd speak. By midnight, Ilara messaged me. We're back on the list, she wrote. They loved your response. They want you to speak next month. Headliner. I stared at the screen. My fingers hovered, then typed one word. Accepted. Then I leaned back, closed the laptop, and sat in the quiet. This is how you answer sabotage. With clarity, not chaos. The email came 3 weeks after the worst kind of silence. Not the quiet that comforts. The kind that watches, waits, spreads. I was being watched, measured. But this time, I had nothing left to shrink for. The subject line read, Austin Tech Forum, confirmed keynote. I read it twice, then a third time, then closed the browser without a word. Audra had been hinting at it, nudging me toward the stage. I'd deflected, smiled, but now it was real. She dropped off the flash drive with the final draft of our slides that afternoon. I thanked her. Then, once she left, I rewrote the entire thing by hand. No slides, no tech. Just me, a blank page, and everything I'd never said out loud. The day of the event, the auditorium buzzed louder than I expected. Rows filled with industry types, collared shirts, startup hoodies, wide-eyed interns. Reporters leaned forward with phones ready. Travis sat near the front. Of course he did. No badge, no lanyard, just entitlement in khaki. When they called my name, I didn't look at him. I didn't look at anyone. I just stepped onto the stage with one folded paper in my hand and a decision that was months overdue. I waited for the room to settle. Then I began. They called it a hobby, I said. A phase, a joke. I didn't pace. I didn't perform. I stood, steady. I told them about Mia, how her decline had started in subtle ways I couldn't see until it was too late. How I couldn't shake the guilt. How that guilt turned into a question, and that question turned into a collar with sensors. I told them how I'd sold my wedding ring to buy my first sensor batch, how I slept on a cot in a garage, how people smiled at me the same way you smile at someone who's building a birdhouse in their retirement, politely, distantly. Then I gave them the facts. 1.2 million units, 4 documented lives saved, vets using it for early diagnosis in shelters. You can still call it useless, I said, but it's saving lives. And it saved mine. The applause didn't start loud. It started still, as if the room had to sit with what I said before deciding what to do with it. And then it came. Not polite, not performative. Real. I let it wash over me, but I didn't smile. My eyes found Travis. He looked like he was searching for a new version of me to recognize. I didn't offer him one. I nodded once. That was all. Then I walked off stage and didn't look back. Outside, the air was warm. Summer creeping in around the edges of spring. I didn't wait for interviews. I didn't linger for handshakes. I just walked. That night, my phone lit up. Travis. I didn't know how far you'd come. I was wrong. I stared at it. Not for long. Just enough to know I didn't need to answer. I powered off the screen, turned toward the window, and whispered to the sky. It's only the beginning. The applause had barely faded when I stepped off stage. Audra met me just past the curtain, her smile tight, eyes bright with adrenaline. A few investors approached from the wings, each with the kind of energy I used to see in Travis, calculated warmth. I nodded, shook hands, thanked them, but I wasn't really present. I'd already delivered what needed saying. What came next wasn't business. It was closure. I moved toward the side exit, letting the buzz of the event dissolve behind me. He was waiting, of course, leaning against the stone wall like he belonged there, like he hadn't just spent months undermining me. You did great tonight, Travis said, his tone measured, like we were equals again. Let's talk now. Real terms. I stopped a few feet from him, kept my coat buttoned. There are no more terms, Travis. He started to speak, but I reached into my bag, pulled out the envelope, and handed it to him. What's this? Official notice. You've been removed from all present and future affiliations with the company. Legal has it on file. He opened the envelope with too much force, like he thought it would change the words inside. I said I was wrong, he snapped. I messaged you. What more do you want? I didn't flinch. You weren't just wrong, Travis. You were cruel. You lied. You tried to erase me. Not just my work. Me. He opened his mouth again, but I cut him off. You knew what people were saying. You watched the rumors grow, and you stayed quiet. Let me take every hit while you played clean. The silence between us now wasn't angry. It was final. I made the collar, I continued quieter. I built it with my hands, tested it with my time, my pain, my money, all while you tried to spin a story around it that made me small enough to control. He blinked, stunned. So that's it? You're cutting me off? I'm finishing what I started, I said, without you standing in the way. I turned before he could speak again, walked through the lobby toward the parking lot. A few people nodded as I passed, but I didn't stop. My car was cool when I slid in. On the passenger seat sat a folded note. Juniper's handwriting, unmistakable. I'm proud of you, Grandma. No explanation, no context, just truth. I let myself breathe, deep, steady. It felt like shedding something heavy, like unzipping an old skin and leaving it behind. At home, I changed into pajamas, microwaved a leftover casserole, and sat with Scout curled against my feet. The quiet didn't feel lonely tonight. It felt earned. I opened my laptop and uploaded a photo of the very first collar prototype. Wires askew, casing cracked, but it worked. That had always been the point. I added a caption before posting, "From 0 to 1 million, built with silence, backed by truth." Then I turned off every notification. Tomorrow, I'd begin the next chapter, one that didn't include him. The invitation sat on my kitchen table for 3 days before I opened it. Thick cardstock, embossed lettering, the kind that signaled money behind every word. The National Tech Gala requests your presence to receive the Lifetime Innovation Award. I didn't smile. I didn't frame it. I just slid it back into the envelope and left it there. It wasn't fear that made me pause. It was the weight of having nothing left to prove. I'd already done what they said I couldn't. But Alara called me that night. "You're not going for them," she said. "You're going for the ones still being told they're too late to matter." 3 months had passed since I walked off that stage in Austin, since I ended whatever remained between Travis and me, since I started waking up with a kind of peace that felt unfamiliar, like new skin after a burn. The drive to San Antonio was quiet. I didn't bring music, just a stack of letters and emails I'd printed over the weeks. Notes from women I'd never met, from retired engineers, single mothers, teenage girls with toolboxes and dreams. One from a girl in Ohio read, "Because of you, my daughter believes she's not too late to matter." I folded that one and slid it into my clutch. The gala was held in an upscale hotel ballroom, crystal chandeliers, navy carpet, too much cologne in the air. My face, larger than life, was projected behind the podium. The MC read from a teleprompter, retelling my story like it was folklore. What began as a grief-driven hobby has now saved lives, improved diagnostics, and inspired a generation. They even mentioned the senator's dog, the one whose seizure was caught by my collar 2 hours before onset. Headlines had followed that story for weeks. I saw Travis before I took the stage. He wasn't seated, just standing in the back corner like a ghost with good posture. He wasn't on the guest list, but someone always finds a way to let people like him in. I didn't stop. I didn't even glance his way. When I stepped up to the microphone, I didn't unfold a speech. I didn't need one. They tried to tell me I had aged out of relevance, I began. That what I built was quaint. That innovation has a timestamp. I paused, letting the air catch. But age isn't rust. It's metal forged hotter. A few people murmured. Others sat forward. I didn't build this collar to be clever. I built it because I lost something once, and I didn't want others to lose what they loved when we could have known sooner. I thanked my team, especially Alara, who'd believed before the headlines. I didn't thank my family, but I mentioned Juniper. Sometimes, I said, we're saved by those who still believe in us before the world teaches them not to. The applause this time was overwhelming, but I didn't linger. I took the award, nodded once, and stepped down. On my way past, I saw Travis lower his gaze. For the first time, he didn't speak. When I returned home that night, a package was waiting on my porch. Brown box, no label. Inside was the co-founder plaque I'd revoked months ago, the one he had once hung in his office. No note, just the plaque. I didn't throw it away. I didn't put it up. I set it aside, unopened. Then I walked to my desk, where a notebook sat waiting. A new sketch already forming. Something smaller, faster. I wasn't done building, not yet. And this time, the quiet around me felt exactly right. Looking back, I've learned that some victories don't come with cheering crowds. They arrive in silence, in resilience, in choosing to keep building even when no one's watching. I didn't set out to prove anything to anyone. I simply refused to disappear. And maybe that's the lesson I'd pass on to anyone listening, especially those who feel overlooked or counted out. Your age, your setbacks, your quietness, none of those disqualify you. They refine you. So I ask you, has there been a moment in your life where someone tried to rewrite your worth? And if so, how did you respond? If this story touched something in you, leave a comment with the number 1, or tell me where you're watching from. If you didn't connect with it, I'd love to hear why. Was it the story, the style, or something else? Let's keep this space honest and human. And if you'd like more stories that carry heart, grit, and truth, make sure you subscribe to the channel. Your support means the world, and we're just getting started.